The Layton series has many different and equally exciting locations, from the shadowy ghost town of Folsense to the bustling city of Montedor. No two locations are similar, and each one has a unique charm, making it memorable in the series. However, there is one location still shrouded in mystery with a dark military presence, a city hidden away from the public view. But unlike the isolated towns of Mist Hallery or Dropstone, this city has a far more sinister spirit: the Nest. Though, how could we possibly find something so purposefully shrouded from the eyes of onlookers? Surely a city with as high a security level as this would want to remain far from the spotlight of mass media, let alone a Layton investigation channel. Well, there is something. Just before the UK went into complete lockdown, I was up in a bookstore in the city of Lincoln, trying to find something to read on my train home to Somerset. And while browsing the travel section, a particular title caught my eye. Helezhnogosk, the story of Russia's secret closed city. The book featured details and information on the closed city of Helezhnogosk. It's kind of in the name. But it wasn't just a single city. All over the world, countless countries had established closed cities that hid sinister secrets, which gave me a lot to sift through. Except this time, I wasn't doing it alone. That's right, somebody actually reached out to me to make an episode of APS, my very first collab. And for today's episode, I'm joined by the very lovely IKG Productions. Over to you.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm excited to partake in this quest, the quest for the Nest. I'm IKG, a YouTube content creator who produces critical and analytical reviews of video games and other media, as well as countdowns and video essays covering all sorts of topics. Some may know me as the Ace Attorney guy, but I actually have an even greater passion for Professor Layton. I have yet to discuss topics pertaining to the Layton series, but I am appreciative of this opportunity to start my own quest, so to speak. Out of all of the wonderful locations featured throughout the Layton series, Azran Legacy has by far the most plentiful and diverse locations featured throughout its story. Chapter 4, The Hunt for the Eggs, contains 5 unique locations on its own, but we'll be diving deep into the unique location of Chapter 5. However, with 91 different closed cities all around the world, we'd have to do quite a bit of investigation.
So, without any further ado,
let's crack this case.
It's commonly thought that the Nest is hidden away somewhere deep in Russia, or as it was in 1960, the Soviet Union, but there's actually no proper maps in the game that prove this theory. This meant that we had to scan each street of the Nest for any clues that could link it to a certain location in the world.
To identify the location of the Nest, we needed to generate a list of requirements that would match the unique features of the Targent stronghold. First and foremost, it's established in Azran Legacy that the Nest is a closed city, meaning that it has a military presence that prevents outsiders from entering. The Nest also features the distinct Azran Pillar, in which the central skyscraper is built around. We deduced that any archaeological site or finding would suffice in comparison to this unique ancient pillar. This meant that the third requirement for replication of the Nest is the presence of a skyscraper. What's immediately iconic about the Nest are the scenes in which the Bostonius lands and the duel between Layton and Descalais. We can therefore deduce that an airport or airfield is a necessary feature for the Nest's real-world counterpart. First appearing in the cutscene with the landing, as well as these areas in which the protagonists travel, a railway system can be seen. Lastly, the city must comply with the Layton 1960 theory, as to agree with the foundation for the rest of the time-sensitive considerations mentioned in this project. This theory would then place Azran Legacy's events in 1959, which means that any settlements built after this year could not be our city.
Once we had finalised a list of the requirements, we began sifting through the images of the Nest locations from the Azran Legacy game files, trying to pick out clues that could point us in the right direction. A short while later, we stumbled over this image. Looking to the back of the street, we can see a vehicle left at the side of the road. Using the Internet Game Cars database, something that seems even more niche than this channel, we can see that the car is based on an Austin armoured car, a military vehicle used by both the British and the Russians, first built in 1913. The car was first designed by the British for use in World War I, though the Russians later developed their own version of the car, producing their first model in 1918. As only 2 countries are known for using this type of car, this instantly narrowed it down to where in the world we were searching: Russia and the UK. Now, the UK does actually have one closed town, being the village of Imber in Wiltshire. The village was first mentioned in 967 AD as a small settlement on the Salisbury Plain. Due to its isolated location, much of the land surrounding the village was bought by the War Office in the later part of the 19th century, and by the time of the Second World War, the land the village was built upon was property of the government. In 1943, to help American soldiers prepare for the invasion of Europe, the residents of Imber were ordered to leave their homes so the town could be converted into a military training ground. Sadly, the town has remained closed ever since, with residents never being able to return to their homes and collect belongings. Unlike the Nest though, this village's tallest building is its parish church, far from the looming skyscrapers in our military city. So, with the UK now firmly eliminated, it was time to turn our eyes towards Russia, where the other 47 closed cities remained.
Using a spreadsheet, we created a chart for each of the 47 closed cities to determine whether or not they met the requirements. Our first objective was to determine the year in which the city was established, as that would immediately rule out any cities that don't comply with the Leighton 1960 theory. What we found was that a few of the closed cities we investigated met many of the Nest's requirements, but were either open to the public before 1959, or were simply not established as closed cities before that year. Mezgoria, for example, was founded in 1979, which immediately voided that location, whereas Vlasica didn't even exist until as late as 2009. Having eliminated the later foundings, we were left with 24 cities across the country. Next, we began examining the cities for the other aforementioned factors, which became difficult due to how much of the information regarding these places has been shrouded for years. With a lot of the cities being purpose-built for nuclear testing and research, very little has been written about that we could easily access. In terms of skyscrapers, we immediately hit a definitional problem, as many of the cities have tall bell towers, churches, or apartment blocks, though nothing particularly huge. Take Serov, for example, which has a bell tower that is 81 meters tall. Bob and I quickly realized that we needed a definition for skyscraper in order to determine what would truly qualify. According to the Visual Dictionary of Architecture, skyscrapers must be taller than 150 meters, and according to the 2016 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, over 40 stories tall. We decided to play it safe and abide by both definitions.
Having eliminated all the cities from after 1959 and any others that didn't have anything similar to our requirements, we ended up with 5 distinct possibilities: Zhelezhnogorsk, Svobodny, Nizhny Novgorod, Vladivostok, and Zelenograd. These cities were the closest to the full set of specifications we were looking for, though unlike in finding Folsense, we weren't able to find somewhere that matched exactly. As many of these cities remained closed, there was no need to build large skyscrapers or impressive buildings, as only the local population would ever see them. As such, we had to try and find a location that had the most in common with the Nest, and only one city could potentially fit the bill: Vladivostok. Vladivostok is a former closed city in southeast Russia, having been opened to outsiders in 1992. The city was first founded in 1860 and is the main home of the Russian Pacific Fleet, with part of the city on the Russian coastline having strong links to Russian naval history. During the Soviet years, the city was used for a lot of construction and research of myriad battleships, tanks, and warplanes, which meant anyone travelling on the railway through the city, the Trans-Siberian Railroad, had to disembark and take a specific night train around the city so they couldn't spy on the government's developments. The city is also served internationally by the Vladivostok International Airport, though flights to the US cities of Seattle and Washington were stopped in the mid-1990s. Various tram networks also exist throughout the city's streets, similar to the one shown in these pictures of the Nest.
One of the most difficult aspects to find in the closed cities of Russia was the presence of at least one skyscraper. The tall skyscraper in which Bronev's office resides, and the location of the Azran pillar, is a key aspect of the Nest, so we did some careful investigation to find the best match we could. While not meeting the Leighton 1960 timeline theory, the administration of Primorsky Krai was the tallest building in Vladivostok at 19 floors in the year of 1983. While not meeting all of the requirements we initially outlined, This is the most accurate building we have. Additionally, the archaeological comparison was also difficult to find. However, the Arsenyev Primorye Museum has several exhibits on the location's history during the Bronze and Iron Ages. Some of the items on display include pottery and primitive building materials, suggesting that indigenous people of the past had similar foundations to that of the Azran civilization. One of these exhibits in particular, The World of Primorye's Indigenous Peoples and Their Traditional Culture, features traditional artwork and clothing that is reminiscent of what the Azran are seen wearing, detailed in certain imagery during flashback sequences in Azran Legacy. While the archaeological findings are rather simple, there is enough evidence to link the nest to Vladivostok's museum and the city's rich history.
While Vladivostok is obviously quite different to Burnev's Hush Hush hideaway, it's still the closest thing that we have to this fictional city. And with the nest firmly rooted back on the map, that right there is another puzzle solved.